There is a reason some prayers seem to go unanswered, not delayed for a moment, not postponed for a season, but completely blocked, as if they never moved beyond the words you spoke. I need you to think about that. Have you ever prayed with sincerity, real focus, real emotion, believing something would shift, and yet nothing changed? The situation stayed the same. The pressure didn't lift. The answer never came. Most people are told to just keep praying or have more faith. And while those things matter, they don't explain why certain prayers feel like they hit a wall. Because what I'm about to tell you is something I learned from the other side. There was a time when I was deeply involved in occult practices, and in those environments, prayer was not seen as something symbolic or hopeful. It was seen as something measurable, trackable, interceptable. Yes, interceptable. We studied patterns. We observed people. And more importantly, we understood something that most people never realize. Not all prayers move freely. There are conditions, hidden rules, that determine whether a prayer carries authority or gets blocked before it produces results. And one of the most dangerous things I've seen is people praying consistently, faithfully, passionately, but unknowingly violating these rules at the same time. So while they're asking for breakthrough, something else is canceling it. While they're speaking life, something else is reinforcing the very problem they're trying to escape, and they don't even know it. That's what makes this so serious. Because when you don't understand the rule, you keep repeating the same pattern, expecting a different outcome. I've watched people stay stuck for years, not because they weren't spiritual enough, not because they didn't believe, but because they were missing something small, something hidden, that made all the difference. And once that rule was corrected, everything changed. Prayers that once felt empty suddenly carried weight. Answers that seemed distant began to appear. Movement replaced silence. So today, I'm going to expose that hidden rule, not theory, not assumption, but something I've seen from a place most people will never go. Because once you understand this, you won't just pray harder. You'll pray in a way that actually gets results. Chapter 2. CHTRTWOTHE HIDN HIREL E BO HY SOM PIERIAS NAVIA MOVI. Now let me take you deeper, because this is where everything begins to make sense. The hidden rule is simple, but most people completely miss it. Authority and agreement must align. You can pray with passion. You can pray for hours. You can say all the right words. But if your words and your agreement don't match, your prayer loses power the moment it's spoken. This is what we understood on the other side. We didn't fear prayer that was emotional. We didn't fear prayer that was repetitive. We didn't even fear loud prayer. What we paid attention to was agreement. Because agreement determines access. Let me explain this in a way you won't forget. If someone is praying for peace, but constantly agreeing with fear throughout the day, speaking it, thinking it, expecting it, then their prayer is being cancelled by their agreement. If someone is asking for financial breakthrough, but deep down believes they will always struggle, that belief becomes stronger than the prayer itself. And this is where the block happens. Not because the prayer was ignored, but because it was contradicted. I've seen this over and over again. People would pray at night, focused, intentional, sincere. But during the day, their words would undo everything they said. Complaining, doubting, speaking negatively about their situation, repeating patterns of lack, fear, and limitation. And from a spiritual standpoint, that creates conflict. And conflict weakens authority, because you cannot declare one thing and agree with the opposite and expect movement. It doesn't work like that. This is the hidden rule. Your prayer is not just what you say in that moment. It's what you consistently agree with before and after you say it. And this is why some prayers feel like they hit a wall. It's not that they weren't heard. It's that they weren't supported. Now here's where this becomes serious. Most people are completely unaware of what they're agreeing with. They don't notice their thoughts. They don't pay attention to their words. They don't realize how often they reinforce the very thing they're trying to break. And because of that, they stay stuck in cycles, praying for change, but maintaining the pattern, asking for breakthrough, but agreeing with limitation. And from the outside, it looks confusing. It feels frustrating. It feels like nothing is working. But from the inside, it's clear. The rule is being violated. Now listen carefully. This is not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. Because the moment your agreement begins to align with your prayer, something shifts. Authority increases. Resistance weakens. Movement begins. And suddenly, what once felt blocked starts to respond. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you how agreement is formed and the subtle ways it's established without you even realizing it. Because once you see it clearly, you'll be able to break it. Now let me take you even deeper, because this is where most people completely lose awareness. When I say agreement, I'm not just talking about what you say out loud. I'm talking about something more subtle, something we used to call an invisible contract. This is the hidden rule behind blocked prayers. Every repeated thought, every consistent word, every belief you hold, especially under pressure, begins to form a kind of internal alignment. And over time, that alignment becomes a contract. Not something you sign physically, but something you reinforce daily. And once that contract is established, it speaks louder than your prayers. I've seen people pray powerful prayers at night, focused, emotional, even desperate. But during the day, their internal dialogue never changed. I'll probably struggle again. Things never work out for me. This is just how my life is. Those statements may seem small, almost harmless, but repetition turns them into agreement, and agreement turns them into structure. So now, when they pray for change, their prayer is trying to override a structure they've been reinforcing for weeks, months, even years. And that's where the blockage forms, not because the prayer lacks sincerity, but because the agreement has more consistency. When I was on the other side, we didn't need to stop someone from praying. That wasn't necessary. All we needed was for their agreement to stay misaligned. Because misalignment creates resistance automatically. And resistance slows everything down. This is why some people feel like they're pushing against something invisible. Like no matter how much they pray, something just won't move. It's not random, it's structural. Now here's the part that changes everything. Agreements are not permanent. They are formed through repetition, and they can be broken the same way. But first, you have to recognize them. You have to become aware of what you're consistently thinking, speaking, and expecting, especially when things aren't going your way. Because pressure reveals your real agreement. Not what you say when you're focused, but what you default to when you're tired, frustrated, or uncertain. That's your true alignment. And that's what your prayers are working against or working with. So if your prayers feel blocked, don't just look at what you're saying during prayer. Look at what you're agreeing with throughout the day. Because that invisible contract is either supporting your breakthrough or silently stopping it. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you how to break that contract specifically and intentionally, so your prayers are no longer resisted, but reinforced. Now this is where everything shifts. You've identified the problem. You understand the hidden rule. You see how agreement creates blockage. But none of that matters if you don't break the contract. Because awareness without action keeps you in the same place. When I was on the other side, there was one thing we always watched for: the moment someone became intentional about their agreement. Because that's when everything we relied on started to collapse. Not instantly, but noticeably. So here's how you break it. First, you interrupt the pattern immediately. The moment you notice a thought or a statement that contradicts what you're praying, stop it. Don't let it pass. Don't ignore it. Don't say, "It's just how I feel." Interrupt it. If the thought says, "Nothing is changing," you respond out loud if you can. "That is not my agreement." This may feel small, even unnecessary at first, but this is how contracts are broken: by refusing to reinforce them. Because every time you let a negative agreement pass unchecked, you strengthen it, and every time you confront it, you weaken it. Second, you replace, not just remove. This is critical. You cannot just stop negative agreement. You must establish a new one. If you remove without replacing, the old pattern will return. So when you interrupt a thought, you immediately replace it with alignment. Things are moving, even if I don't see it yet. My prayers are working. I am aligned with breakthrough. You are not lying to yourself. You are retraining your agreement. And repetition is what makes it stick. Third, you carry your prayer beyond the moment. This is where most people fail. They pray once, maybe twice, and then go back to normal thinking. But prayer is not just a moment, it's a continuation. What you say in prayer must continue in your thoughts, your words, and your expectations. Otherwise, you create separation, and separation weakens results. So, if you prayed for peace, you maintain peace in your words. If you prayed for provision, you speak and expect provision. If you prayed for breakthrough, you stop preparing for failure. This is alignment, and alignment increases authority. Now, here's something I need you to understand deeply. This is not about perfection. You will have moments where old thoughts try to come back. That's normal. What matters is not whether they appear, it's whether you agree with them. Because agreement is a choice. And every time you choose alignment, you move further away from blockage and closer to movement. I've seen people make this shift, and within days, everything changed. Not because something external suddenly appeared, but because the resistance they were unknowingly creating disappeared. And once resistance is removed, flow begins. So don't underestimate this step. This is where your prayers stop being resisted and start being reinforced. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you the exact way to pray with this alignment. So your words don't just sound powerful, they become effective. Now, this is where everything becomes real. You've broken the contract. You've interrupted the old agreement. You've started replacing it with alignment. But now comes the part that determines whether your prayers actually carry weight. How you pray from this point forward. Because prayer is not just about what you say, it's about the position you speak from. When I was on the other side, we could always tell when someone shifted into alignment. Their prayers sounded different, not louder, not longer, but clearer, more focused, more stable. Because authority doesn't come from volume, it comes from alignment. So before you even speak, you need to check something internally. Are you saying these words, or are you standing on them? There's a difference. Most people pray from a place of hoping something might happen. But aligned prayer comes from a place of establishing what will happen. So when you begin, don't rush. Take a moment. Clear your mind. Become aware of what you've been agreeing with, and make the decision to align it fully. Then you speak, not emotionally, not desperately, but deliberately. You begin like this: I remove every agreement that has been working against my prayers. Say it slowly. Let it settle. Because you're not just saying words, you're resetting your position. Then continue. I align my thoughts, my words, and my expectations with what I am asking for. This is where authority builds. You are closing the gap between what you pray and what you live. Now go deeper. What I declare in this moment is supported by my agreement. This is powerful because now there is no contradiction, no internal resistance, just alignment. And from that place, you speak directly into your situation. What I have been asking for is now moving. What felt blocked is no longer supported. What was delayed begins to respond. Notice something here. You are not begging. You are not asking again and again. You are establishing movement. And this is what changes everything. Because once alignment is present, repetition becomes reinforcement, not desperation. Now, here's the key most people miss. After you pray, you don't disconnect. You don't go back to doubt. You don't go back to fear. You don't go back to negative expectation. Because that would recreate the same conflict you just removed. Instead, you carry the same tone throughout your day. If a negative thought appears, you interrupt it. If doubt tries to rise, you replace it. If circumstances look unchanged, you stay aligned anyway, because your authority is no longer based on what you see. It's based on what you've established. And this is where prayers begin to move differently. Not slowly, not randomly, but with direction. I've seen this shift happen in real time. People who once felt like their prayers were empty suddenly begin to experience clarity, response, and movement. Not because they changed their words dramatically, but because they removed the contradiction behind them. And once contradiction is gone, resistance has nothing to hold on to. So don't rush this process. Don't treat it casually. Because this is the point where your prayers stop feeling like effort and start becoming effective. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you what happens immediately after this alignment, because there are signs that your prayers are finally moving. And if you recognize them early, you won't miss your moment. Now listen carefully, because this is where many people misunderstand what's happening. You've aligned your agreement. You've prayed with authority. You've removed the internal contradiction. So naturally, you expect something to change. But here's the truth. When prayers begin to move, the first signs are not always dramatic. They're subtle. And if you don't recognize them, you might think nothing is happening, when in reality, everything has already started shifting. When I was on the other side, we could always tell when someone's prayers were no longer blocked. Not because something huge happened immediately, but because the pattern around them began to change. The first sign is clarity. Things that once felt confusing suddenly become simple. Decisions that used to take days now take minutes. You know what to do, and there's no internal resistance. That's not random. That's alignment producing direction. The second sign is movement in communication. People who were silent begin to respond. Delayed messages come through. Conversations that felt stuck suddenly reopen. It may seem small, but it's not, because communication is often the first area where blockage breaks. Then comes small releases, an unexpected opportunity, a delayed payment finally arriving, a minor breakthrough that doesn't look like much at first. Don't ignore it, because small releases are indicators that larger movement is already forming. Now, here's the part most people misinterpret. Sometimes, before a full breakthrough happens, things feel unstable, situations shift quickly, plans change. Something you thought was secure suddenly moves or even disappears. And in that moment, people panic. They think something is going wrong. But from what I've seen, it's the opposite. It's reordering. Because anything that was built on misalignment cannot support what's coming next. So it has to move. It has to adjust. It has to clear out. And that process can feel uncomfortable if you don't understand it. But if you do understand it, you won't react emotionally. You'll stay aligned. Now, here's another important sign: your internal state changes. You stop feeling desperate. You stop overthinking every outcome. You stop expecting things to fail. Instead, there's a quiet confidence, not loud, not forced, just steady. That's one of the strongest indicators that your prayers are no longer blocked. Because when alignment is real, it shows up internally before it fully manifests externally. And this is where your awareness matters most. Because if you misinterpret these signs, you might pull back. You might doubt. You might question. You might stop what you've started. And that's exactly where many people lose their breakthrough. Not because it didn't begin, but because they didn't recognize it. So from this point forward, pay attention. Watch for clarity. Watch for movement. Watch for small changes. Because they are not random. They are evidence. Evidence that your prayers are no longer being resisted. They are being answered. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you exactly how to respond to these signs so you don't just start the process. You complete it. Now this is the part where everything becomes decisive. You've aligned your agreement. You've prayed with authority. You've started to see the signs. But here's what most people don't realize. What you do after movement begins determines whether it grows or fades. When I was on the other side, we didn't just monitor blocked prayers. We watched closely when things started to shift. Because that moment was the most vulnerable. Not for the system, for the person, because this is where old patterns try to come back. Hesitation, doubt, overthinking. And if those patterns return, they can slow down what has already started. So your response must be intentional. First, act on clarity immediately. When you suddenly know what to do, do it. Don't delay it. Don't question it endlessly. Don't wait for perfect timing, because clarity is part of the answer to your prayer. And if you ignore it, you create space for confusion to return. I've seen this happen so many times. Someone prays for direction, receives it, and then delays acting on it. And slowly, that clarity fades. Not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't used. Second, refuse to return to old agreement. This is critical. Even when things begin to move, your mind may try to pull you back. What if this doesn't last? What if it goes wrong again? What if I'm expecting too much? These thoughts are not harmless. They are attempts to rebuild the same contract you just broke. So when they come, don't entertain them. Interrupt them, just like you learned. Replace them with alignment. This is working. Things are moving. I remain aligned with my prayer. Consistency here is protection. Third, handle results with discipline. Now, this applies especially when your prayer involves provision, opportunity, or progress. When something begins to come in, money, connections, opportunities, you must treat it differently than before. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but intentionally. Because increase without discipline creates instability, and instability can reopen doors that were just closed. When I was on the other side, this is where many breakthroughs collapsed. Not because they were fake, but because they were mishandled. But discipline protects what alignment produces. And finally, stay connected to what you established. Don't disconnect just because you see results. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make. They push until something shifts, and then they stop completely. But alignment is not a one-time action. It's a maintained position. You don't have to repeat everything with the same intensity, but you must stay aware. Keep your words aligned. Keep your thoughts intentional. Keep your expectations consistent. Because what you continue to agree with, you continue to sustain. Now let me say this clearly. You are no longer in the same position you were before. Something has shifted. Your prayers are no longer blocked. Movement has begun. And your response right now is what determines whether this becomes temporary progress or permanent change. So don't slow down. Don't go back. Don't treat this casually, because you are no longer trying to break through. You are in the middle of it. And if you respond correctly, this doesn't stop here. It builds. Now we've reached the point where everything is decided. You've done the work. You've aligned your agreement. You've prayed with authority. You've seen movement begin. But there is one final stage, and this is where most people lose what they started. I need you to understand this clearly. Breakthrough is not lost in the beginning, it's lost in the middle. Not when nothing is happening, but when something has started, and you don't sustain it. When I was on the other side, this was the moment we relied on the most. We didn't need to stop someone at the beginning. We didn't even need to fight them directly. We just needed them to lose consistency. Because the moment someone relaxes, the moment they stop paying attention, the moment they go back to old thinking without realizing it, the same patterns begin to rebuild, slowly, quietly, subtly. And before they realize it, they're back in the same cycle they thought they escaped. That's why this stage is a test, not a test of your effort, but a test of your discipline. Will you stay aligned even when things feel normal again? Will you keep your words intentional even when there's no pressure? Will you maintain your agreement even when you're no longer desperate for change? Because this is where alignment becomes identity. You're no longer trying to fix something. You're choosing how you operate. Now here's what you need to do. For the next few days, stay extremely aware. Pay attention to your thoughts when you wake up. Pay attention to your words during the day. Pay attention to your reactions when something doesn't go exactly as expected. Because this is where old patterns try to slip back in. Not loudly, quietly. A small negative thought, a casual statement of doubt, a moment of hesitation, and if you ignore it, it grows. But if you catch it, it stops. That's the difference now. You're aware. So use that awareness. Interrupt anything that doesn't align. Replace it immediately. Reinforce what you've established. This is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent enough that the old pattern cannot rebuild. Because patterns need repetition to survive. And you've stopped feeding them. Now listen carefully. This is where your mindset must shift. You are no longer trying to get your prayers answered. You are maintaining a position where your prayers are already in motion. That's different, that's stable, that's powerful. And one CT